eFiling overview with Tax1099 and Bill.com. This is our first joint webinar that we're doing together for this 2018 tax year, and we are really happy that you've all joined us today. We have a lot of great information to share from both sides, from Tax1099 and from Bill.com, and we want to jump right into that. Just a quick little information here about what makes us a good match for your 1099 e-filing process. So something similar about both of us is our concern and our care for the security of your information. That is our top priority. On the Tax 1099 side, we have 256-bit bank grade encryption levels. We really go above and beyond for security, and we know that Bill.com is the same. We also have just an extreme attentiveness to your feature requests. Those are really important to us, and that's something that prompted our two-way sync that we have between Bill.com and Tax1099. Something that prevents you from having duplicate data. It makes sure that everything is updated in both sites, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. And then another thing that makes us a good match is that we want to make sure that your to-do tasks are the easiest things that you do. In 1099s, we know that some people consider to be a nightmare, and we want to help alleviate your worries with this session. This is the Tax1099 team. I am Geneva Brock. I'm the marketing projects lead here at Zenwork. I've been here for just over 2 years, providing information to our e-filers. Also with me from my team is Ed Pratt. He's our COO here, and he's been with Zenwork for over 5 years, and he uses 19 plus years of experience in compliance to prepare all of our users for the 1099 e-filing process, inform them about changes, and just best practice items. We also have on the session here today, we've got Preeti. She is the Principal Product Manager over at Bill.com. She's got a very strong background in product management roles, including some leading tech companies like Mozilla and eBay. And she's really passionate about solving real-world consumer problems with simple and beautiful products experiences. So we're really happy to have her with us to walk through kind of how this process works towards the end of the session. We also have with us Dan Beck, and he is product manager over at Bill.com, and he is happy to share some of his knowledge as well. So a couple of housekeeping items before we jump into the session. A lot of you have already found that chat box that's on the lower left side of your screen, and you can use that to ask questions anytime throughout the session, and we'll be doing our best to respond to those as we go along. Since we've got both Tax1099 and Bill.com on this session, just go ahead and start your question with the @Tax1099 or @Bill.com to kind of show who your question is for, and we will have our team members answer those. We'll also save some time at the end of the session for question and answer, and we will follow up by email to any questions that we weren't able to get to at this time, and we can keep that dialogue open. We will be sending out notes from this session. We'll have a recording that we'll send out as well. So you'll have the PDF of these slides that you can kind of pass around your office, get your team really informed about what's going on with 1099 this year. And as I mentioned before, we'll also get to any questions we didn't answer at the time. So our agenda items for today, we're going to be discussing compliance changes, both on the federal and state filing level. We're going to talk about correction types and processes. Even though not much changes with that from year to year, it's something that causes confusion to our users and something that we'd like to make sure is understood. We're going to go over some vendor form delivery options. What's new, what's something that you've used before. We'll talk about both of those. Share some little known facts about e-filing. And then we'll dive into how Tax1099 and Bill.com seamlessly sync that information back and forth and just really make your process easier. We'll tell you how to use our platforms together And then at the end of the session, we'll have a little bit of time for question and answer. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed, and he's going to start guiding us with some of this information that we have to share.
Thanks, Geneva, and hi, everyone. Welcome to the session. As Geneva mentioned, we're going to go over quite a bit of information here in the first portion of our session today, and then we'll have some time for demos. So we'll get to see a little bit about how everything works here. For the federal side, we're going to start there and talk about a possible new e-filing requirement. We keep getting some conflicting information on that. There is some new information around Box 7 automatic extensions, and then the instructions for late Box 7 1099 miscellaneous forms is something else that has come up. And so we'll talk a little bit about why Box 7 is a little particular as we go through here. One of the questions that we've had come up here recently with the government shutdown, something we were just talking about yesterday, was is there going to be any sort of accommodation? Is there going to be any sort of extension of the deadline? The IRS posted a bulletin last night regarding personal tax income filing. So saying that they are still going to be ready to go on January 28th. They're going to begin processing refunds in the same schedule that they had posted before for folks filing their 1040s. So we don't think there's going to be any sort of change to your 1099 miscellaneous or your W-2 or any of the other forms that you may be filing. Those due dates are not going to change from what we have seen and heard from the IRS. So just want to kind of get that out of the way first because that has been something that's been prevalent on people's minds. But let's talk about some of these new, these federal e-filing items. This one, the first one we want to start with is something that is a published item from the IRS, but they haven't actually activated it. So if you're familiar with the IRS, they'll go through, they'll publish draft information, they'll put it out for comment, and the comment period will end, and then usually they'll make some modifications and they'll post a final, and then they'll make it active. Well, they posted the final for this one, but they haven't actually made it active. So they haven't said it's truly active for the 2018 tax year. However, what it means for larger filers primarily is that the IRS is going to begin aggregating your information returns. So up to this point, you've been able to file up to 249 forms. You've been able to file 249 forms on paper if you wanted to. So you could file 249 1099 miscellaneous forms and another 200 W-2s, and you'd be fine without exceeding any IRS threshold. The IRS is now aggregating all of those returns together, so miscellaneous forms, 1099K forms, W-2 forms, 1099 dividend forms. So if your payer entity has more than 250 or more forms, the IRS is going to begin requiring that to be an e-file. So they're working on again finalizing that and publishing that out to be posted. We had heard 2018 was the year for that, but now they're kind of backtracking a little bit and haven't finalized that out there. So something to be aware of if you do encounter that. If you are someone who has, approaching that 250 threshold for all of your different forms together, that'll be something you'll want to be aware of as we move forward. Regarding the extensions, so the Box 7 NEC, and NEC just means non-employee compensation. So when you look at your 1099 miscellaneous forms, you'll see that printed out on the Box 7. It'll say non-employee compensation. That Box 7, as you are probably well aware, was moved to be due to the IRS on January 31st, a couple of years ago. Prior to that, paper forms had been due February the 28th. E-file forms had been due March 31st. And those dates still remain true for other boxes on the miscellaneous form, box 1, box 3. Those are still due on March 31st or February 28th. But the non-employee compensation was moved back to January 31st. The W-2 was also moved back to January 31st due to the IRS. And that was because the IRS was trying to prevent more fraudulent tax refund dispersals from being sent. So criminals would steal your identity. They would file a They would file a tax refund using your identity in early February before you had a chance to go in and do your filing. And the IRS didn't really have any way to compare that because the W-2 and 1099 information was coming in so late in the year. And so the IRS would just issue that refund. And then when you would file your true refund in maybe late February, early March, the IRS would say, hey, what are you trying to do? You've already filed and gotten your refund. You can't do that. So that was, of course, an issue. Lots of people were realizing they had their identity stolen. The IRS was sending tax refunds to people who did not deserve to get that tax refund. And so they pulled the deadline earlier in an effort to avoid some of those fraudulent dispersals. During the last couple of years, though, the IRS did not change the ability for you to request an extension for your Box 7. The Form 8809 is an automatic extension that the IRS offers, and they've offered it for, they offer it for many forms, but the 8809 lets you file and immediately automatically be granted an additional 30 days to file your forms to the IRS. This year, the IRS is eliminating the Box 7 and the W-2 for the extension. You can no longer get an extension automatically for Box 7 or for W-2 forms. They do have a few allowances, a few safe harbors that they have, and we're going to list those here on this next page. When you check out the Form 8809, it is something we offer in Tax 1099, but you can also do it separately from Tax 1099. The Form 8809 is it does have a few safe harbors on it. You have to fill the form in manually. You got to send it in via paper. You have to get approved. So you want to do it as early as you can before the deadline of January the 31st. But here are the safe harbors. The first is federally declared disaster areas. So if you are in California and we're part of the wildfire issue, if you're on the East Coast and we're part of the hurricane issues, and you're still under a federally declared disaster area designation, the IRS will recognize that and provide a 30-day extension of the time to file. Similarly, for fire, casualty, or natural disaster, so outside of those federally declared disaster areas, disasters still happen to businesses. A restaurant might catch fire and all the records go up with the fire. So in that situation, the IRS, again, is more accommodating. They will allow that 30-day extension. You do still have to fill it out via paper, sign it under penalty of perjury, and send it in. And then the third one here is the death, serious illness, or unavoidable absence of the filer of information return. So that would be, for example, a bookkeeper that is working for a company is ill during the filing season and simply can't do it. They would consider that as a potential reason for doing that 30-day extension. A couple more on the next slide here. Businesses filing an information return for the first year of establishment just means if I started a business this year, I'm an entrepreneur, I start a business, it's first business maybe, I don't really know a whole lot about compliance. And because I don't know a whole lot about compliance, I might not even know that I have to do 1099s. I get to the end of the year and I start looking around thinking, wow, I probably need to hire an accountant or a tax professional, someone to help me do this stuff. And they are the ones who let me know, hey, you really should have been keeping track of these vendors and getting W-9s and collecting, make sure your payments are processing in the correct manner through bill.com. That would be an instance where the IRS would again consider that 30-day extension through the paper filing. And then the last one is one that came up during that comment period. The comment came up that sometimes we don't get the third-party sick pay statements and things like that in a timely basis. And so that would be yet another reason why the IRS may grant that Box 7 extension. So the key message here is if you've always relied on a 30-day automatic extension for Box 7 or for W-2s, that won't be available this year. You've got to fall into one of those safe harbors to get that extra 30 days. This one is something that on the Tax 1099 side, we've incorporated already kind of as a back-end best practice. We've been doing it the last couple of years. Basically it goes again back to that date changing to January 31st for the due date for Box 7 on your miscellaneous forms. I mentioned earlier that the date changed for Box 7. However, Box 1, Box 3, other boxes are still March 31st due date for your e-filing and February 28th for your paper filing. Because of that split, because of the way that the dates are different now for those deadlines, the IRS really would prefer to get those forms in separate batches. So they would like, if you're paper filing, they would like you to send them your paper files with your 1096 in the mail for box 7 only, and then send them a separate one for the box 1, the box 3. And to enforce that, if you happen to submit your 1099 box 7 files late, so let's say you submit those via paper on February the 10th, and you also submit some box 1s, some rent boxes in that same batch for February the 10th, officially the box 1 are not due until March 31st, but because you're sending them in the same batch with some box 7s that are late, the IRS is going to consider all of those to be late, and they're going to penalize you based on all of those being late. So you want to make sure that you are, when you're doing your filing, you're making those box 7s in a separate batch from your other boxes on your 1099 miscellaneous forms. Again, if you use Tax 1099, we do this. We've been doing this the last couple of years. If you've been a user in the past, you may have noticed that you filed one set of forms. Maybe you filed 10 forms, and 9 of them were box 7. One of them was a rental, and so that was a box 1. We're going to have been sending you a couple of different reference numbers for that here in the last couple of years. You get one for the box 7s and one for the box 1, and that's because we're doing that, take care of that process for you, so you don't have to worry about getting in any trouble for filing things together that should have been filed separately. So that's a bit about federal filing, some things that are a little bit different this year. State filing, as you probably are aware, is a different beast altogether. For a lot of the states, they are participating in something that is called the Combined Federal State Filing Program. Some of the largest states participate in that. California is an example of a state that participates in the Combined Federal State Filing Program. There are 30, 31, 32. There's a fairly good number of states that participate in that Combined Federal State Filing Program. The problem from the state's perspective with that combined federal state filing program is that they don't get the information from the combined federal state filing program until June or July, after you have submitted your forms in January or February or March. The IRS gets that information much earlier than the states get it. And the states are a little antsy about getting that information. So we've seen a couple of states flip in the last couple of years to requiring a direct filing. And we think that might be something that happens a bit more as more and more states become aware of the need to get that information on an earlier and earlier basis. So something just to be aware of: if you live in a state that doesn't participate in the combined federal state filing program, you may have a direct two-state filing. Oregon is an example of a state like that. Pennsylvania is an example of a state like that. There are some states that do both. You can submit through the combined federal state filing program, but they also require you to submit something separate. Massachusetts is a state like that. There are other states that are happy to get your information from the combined federal state filing program, but if you have a withholding for a 1099 miscellaneous form, they want you to submit that directly. So there are lots of iterations of what the states might be up to out there. We keep up with that. So we have some tax analysts on staff that keep up with the states. We do have some independent consultants who come in and work with us as well to make sure we're following the rules as closely as we can. Now, the states do change things on an ongoing basis. I get emails every week about states that have changed and what those changes are and what that might mean for people who are doing filing. There are also states that have some really confusing information on their websites. So we keep up as best we can, but it's always good for you to be aware of what those state changes are as well. So as the IRS kind of continues to build out their capacity, maybe they'll begin sharing that information. I was at an IRS tax forum back in September, and one of the side topics that we were talking about there was when could the IRS realistically get this information over to the states? And it's a bit of a burden on the IRS. You know, they're underfunded, understaffed, typically, at least from their perspective, as is, and so adding more work for them, adding work for them to turn around faster is not something that they're really looking forward to. But be aware that some states may begin changing, shifting over to more of a direct filing need. So as I mentioned, we do keep up with that. When you go into Tax 1099, if you import your information directly over from bill.com, you've got people in some of those states. When you get to the checkout screen, you'll see that we've identified those states for you, and you can do the direct-to-state filing. We won't identify the combined federal state filing program states like California, just because there is no separate filing that happens for that. But if a separate filing is required, we will automatically identify that for you and give you the chance to do that state filing through the Tax 1099 platform. All right, another topic that's always a big question that comes up, usually not this time of the year so much. Usually this is what happens in February and March and April. So you do your job, right? You go out there, whether you're the business owner, you're an accountant, you're a bookkeeper, you go out, you do your filing before January 31st for those Box 7 1099 miscellaneous forms. You get them in the mail before January 31st. The person who gets it, maybe they just don't open it for a couple weeks. So they say, I'm not going to do my taxes until March. I'm not going to do my taxes until April. I don't even need to look at this. So they just put it in a drawer and come back to it later. When they come back to it later, they find out that something's wrong with their form, and that's the first time that you hear about it. They call you up and they say, "Hey, this is not right. The amount's incorrect. My name's spelled wrong. You've got the wrong taxpayer identification number. Whatever the incorrect information is on that form, you need to provide them with a corrected form." So there's really two scenarios that this falls under. One is the box amount being incorrect. The second is the name or the taxpayer identification number being incorrect. You'll notice that nothing mentions there about needing to file a corrected form for an address being incorrect. You can certainly do a corrected form if the address is incorrect, but the IRS is not concerned about the address for the recipient being incorrect, because you could always take the form you've already done, put it into an envelope, send it to that new address, and the IRS would be just fine with that. They've already gotten the amount, the taxpayer identification number, and the name, and that's what they're mostly concerned with. In order to correct an incorrect filing, there's two ways. The first one is the incorrect box amount. So for the incorrect box amount, you really just need to do a new form for that. So if you're doing a paper filing, you'll need to make sure you've got an extra 1096. You check the box at the top of the Form A, you peel that off, you send it in with the 1096, and so on. The problem with that on the paper filing side can be that if you've already used all your 1096s, you might have a hard time finding a 1096 if it's March or April or May when you get the news about this correction needing to be done. On the e-filing side, we offer the exact same service. So you just check the box at the top. We can do that e-file corrected form for you. When you do that corrected form, it's going to override the original form that you sent for that taxpayer, and it's going to put in the new amount. And that could be a situation where you've just done the wrong dollar figure. You know, you said $10,000 is what it was. Then later, when they called you, you realized that a portion of that was materials, and so wasn't maybe included on that, or a portion of that was not recorded accurately and should not have been included on that form. So maybe you should have notified them only for $9,000, and so that would be correcting that in the same box. A different version of that might be you put the amount in box 1, but you really should have put the amount in box 7. And so you can put a 0 for the corrected form in box 1, and then you can put the correct amount in box 7 and do that type 1 correction. That's a pretty easy one. You're just changing the amount and getting that corrected out there. For the second one, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. As you may know, whenever you get taxpayer identification numbers and names, putting in those into the forms, the IRS is validating that information against their database. They're checking the Social Security Administration for Social Security numbers. They're checking their own records for business employer identification numbers, and they're making sure that the information matches up. So if you've gotten a situation where you've had a paper W-9 that's come to you by someone whose handwriting is like mine, which means it's hard to read, then you may have a situation where you typed the information in incorrectly into bill.com when you created that vendor record through no real fault of your own. You know, it's just scratchy handwriting, and it's hard to get that information in there correctly because you just can't read it. It could also just be you're doing it really fast, and so you transpose a couple of numbers in that taxpayer identification number. Or you transpose a couple of letters in the person's name and don't realize it until later. In this situation, the type 2 situation, first thing you have to do is void the original form. So you've got to file a corrected form with the wrong information, with the wrong taxpayer identification number that you already submitted, with the wrong name that you already submitted, whatever it is. You've got to file a voided form. And void just means a type 1 correction with a $0 where you had filed it before. So you got to do that first. Then after that form is done, you will want to file a regular form that will enable you to submit for that new information with the updated tax identification number, with the updated vendor's name. That is what's going to enable the IRS to understand exactly who that form should have been sent to. So two different types of corrections. The first one's pretty easy. You're just doing the one form with the corrected at the box, corrected checkbox at the top. The second form is the second type is a little bit more cumbersome because you've got to do two forms. You've got to do the type 1 correction for getting that form voided out, and then you've got to do a brand new form for getting that correct information over to that vendor, as well as getting it over to the IRS. Just one quick thing that I want to mention about the type 1 correction as well. I don't think I have this on a slide, but one little note that they did a couple of years ago, around the same time they did the deadline date change. They built a safe harbor into the corrected form filing, and so you can have an incorrect amount up to $100 that's incorrect and not have to do a corrected form. Now your recipient may still want to get a corrected form, and if so, then you need to send them a corrected form. But per the IRS rules, if you're within $100 on the amount, then they're not going to be bothered if you don't do a corrected form for that one. So let's talk a little bit about how we get the forms over to the recipients. There's a couple of primary ways. The first is paper. So if you've done paper filing in the past, you're familiar with having the copy B, the copy 1, the copy 2, whatever copies you need to send to the recipient. It's all in that paper. You peel the right copies off, you put them into the envelope, you send it out to the recipient via mail. If you're using Tax 1099, then we provide you with a PDF. You don't have to have any special forms, any perforations, any particular printer. You just print it on plain white paper and put it into an envelope and mail it. We can mail that for you, so we're mailing those as a third party. If you work for a really large company, you may have your own internal mailing division, like an insurance company. They do a lot of mailing. They may be contracting with another outside party to do that, so there are third parties who can do that mail copy for you as well. So that's kind of the traditional way of sending that information out, getting it via paper. More and more people are looking for their information electronically, though, especially I would say younger workers. They like to get that information through email. They like to get it through a portal delivery, and we do offer both of those through Tax 1099. So through that email, you want to make sure that you're getting the information from the recipient. Just getting that permission from the recipient to send it electronically. That's kind of the big ask from the IRS, is that you get permission from the recipient to send their information to them electronically, and that you maintain a record of that. So you could simply send them an email if you're going to send the form via email, and ask them if that's okay with them, and they say yes, then you're good to go. If they say no, then you need to send them a paper copy of it. If you're using a portal solution like the one in Tax 1099, then we do capture that opt-in, opt-out for you. So that is something that is available for you through the e-delivery. One thing, though, for either of those electronic deliveries, and I know this is going to sound obvious when I say it, but it's important to know, you do have to have email addresses for the recipients in order to take advantage of those. Now, if you're using Bill.com and their electronic payments, you got that probably. You captured that as you were setting that vendor up, or as the vendor was setting themselves up through Bill.com. So that's a useful way to facilitate the sending of that information. But if you have people who are maybe outside of Bill.com that you're paying, and you want to send them an electronic copy of their 1099, you got to make sure you've got their email address so that you can have that form sent to them in an appropriate manner. So a couple of little known facts about e-filing. And we're calling these little known facts. If you've done e-filing before, you probably know these already. But people who've done paper filing in the past may or may not know some of these about e-filing. First, the joint submission for all the forms under a payer. So in kind of the old paper format, the IRS really just kind of wants to get one submission from you. As long as it's in a timely basis, they want to get it from you in one bunch. If you've got 47 forms, they're all box 7, they want you to send that to them as one batch of 47 forms. But when you're e-filing, that's not particularly important to the IRS. When the IRS gets paper forms, they've got to take those forms, they've got to kind of pull them apart, They've got to get the 1096, they've got to get the copy A's, they've got to scan them all into their machines, they've got to have a quality analysis go through and make sure that that all matched up correctly. The boxes went to the right place, the totals are matching the 1096. It takes them months to get that information done through their paper filing process. On the e-file side, as an e-file provider, we're already giving them the information in the format that they want. And so it's much easier for them to reconcile that information back to the totals. So if you filed all 47 of those forms in one batch, or you filed 47 separate batches of one form each, from the IRS's perspective, it doesn't really matter. They are getting all that information, and in their database side, it's all converging together for your payer entity that you filed it under. Another thing is that no 1096 is required when you do an e-file. So I mentioned earlier the kind of the hazard of doing the 1096 is if you get a late instance where you need to do a filing, if it's off season, maybe you realized I just totally forgot to give this guy a 1096. I paid him. I wrote him a check directly out of my checkbook. He wasn't in Bill.com because Bill.com would have kept up with that for me. But I wrote him a check directly, and instead of including him in my e-file or in my paper filing, I just totally forgot about it. So now it's April, and I need to send this guy one so he can have it, so he's got it for his records. And nobody is selling the 1096s at this point. Staples doesn't have them. Office Depot doesn't have them. Walmart doesn't have them. Nobody's got the 1096s. So e-filing takes care of that for you. You don't have to worry about it because there is no 1096s involved. The 1096 is replaced by the e-file, and so you don't have to worry about having that on hand. And then separate state filing, if you're paper filing, you're going to need to be sending that information to your state. So even California, I mentioned they are a participant in the Combined Federal State Filing Program. But you have to e-file in order to participate in the Combined Federal State Filing Program. So if you're just doing 5 forms and you're doing them all via paper, you're going to need to send a copy of that over to the state of California because they do want to get the information from you about that filing. So that's going to be a separate state filing. With an e-file service, often you don't have to worry about that for those combined federal state filing states. We'll take care of that for you. And for the direct to state, we can take care of those as well by using Tax1099.com. A couple new things in Tax1099, a two-way sync for Bill.com. So primarily the information is coming from Bill.com, right? You've got your vendors there, you've got your payments there. In January, you're going to connect Bill.com to Tax1099 using the app, and it's going to bring that information over. But we've built something inside of Tax1099 that lets you, if you want to, collect the vendor information inside of Tax1099 and sync it back over to Bill.com. We can even put in the PDF copy of the W-9 over in the Bill.com vendor record. And so if you create a new vendor in Tax1099, send them out the W-9 through Tax1099, collect it. You can do a 10 match back in Tax1099. You can have all that information validated and correct, and then send it over to Bill.com to start paying that person. It kind of depends on how you want to use the tool, but that's what enables you to keep it in sync and have the information transferred securely from Tax1099 to Bill.com, so that when you get to January next year, you know you've got all your information correct for that vendor. 10 masking and unmasking. So we, by default, based on IRS recommendation, mask the tax identification number on the 1099 form. So what that means is we're only showing the last 4 digits of the Social Security number or the EIN. You can kind of toggle back and forth now between showing that and not showing that, just depending on what you want to do. And it's available as an account-wide setting for our enterprise users as well. And you can also block a single form. So previously, if you had 10 forms and one of them, for whatever reason, needed to be blocked out of there, it was a C corporation, or you just found out you didn't need to notify that person, we didn't have a way to block a single form, but we've built that this year so that you can go in and block a single form out there. I mentioned the enterprise account, so this is mainly for accountants or accounts payable departments who have multiple people involved in the process. We've got some extra features built in our enterprise software, workflow and user management. Everybody gets their own login. The audit trail is user by user, and we do some of the 10 matching for free. We've also built a notice management tool recently that is available for the enterprise edition if that is something that you need to count on. So we do have a couple of extra things available for enterprise, and you can always reach us at support at tax1099.com or on Tax1099 in the chat window and discuss the options there if that's something that you are interested in. All right. Well, I think I've been talking long enough now. So, Preeti, I think we're going to turn it over to you to take over for the demonstration for at this point.
Yeah, and while Preeti is loading her screen there, we've had quite a few questions come in the chat box, and I want to thank everyone for helping us out with that. So here's one question that we had. If you don't have the TIN, the taxpayer identification number from a vendor, you've tried to collect it, but you just can't get that, you can't obtain that. Should you still file, and is there a way to do that with Tax 1099?
Yeah, so there is a way to do that with Tax 1099. There is an option to select no TIN provided when you're creating the vendor record inside of Tax 1099. So you can certainly do that. The IRS will take that. Now, you want to be aware that because you don't have a tax identification number, you're likely going to be getting a notice from the IRS, a B notice, about not having that tax identification number. But as for the filing, yes, it is possible that the IRS wants you to file it. They want to know that information about the amount that was paid, but keep trying to collect the TIN from the person. And just as a best practice, and I know I've probably said this 100 times to various people, but um, uh, try to get the W-9 before you issue a payment. It's always the best practice to have that tax identification number and name on the W-9 form, and and get that before you issue any sort of payment.
Okay, yeah, that's a great answer there. And then another question that we got a couple times is when is the latest that you can submit the 1099 forms for them to go through Tax 1099 in time to reach the IRS?
For the e-file, the deadline for submitting it in Tax 1099 is midnight Eastern Standard Time on January the 31st. And so we go all the way to midnight Eastern Time on January 31st for the submission for e-file. If you want us to mail a copy of it for you, though, then you'll want to do it within a couple of days before that. So at the end of the day, January 29th, just to give us time to do all the paperwork there to get the mail copy out.
Okay, thanks for that as well. Here's another question. 1099s for people who are registered outside of the US. Is that something that needs to be filed? How does that work?
Yeah, generally speaking, and there's a couple of different answers to that. So people who are outside the U.S. don't get a 1099. They're considered foreign vendors, and they get a 1042S. So they get a different form. You collect a W-8 instead of a W-9. If it is a U.S. person who is based outside of the United States, that's a little bit different, and you may want to seek some tax advice on that one to determine whether you should send a 1099 miscellaneous or a 1042S. We can't provide that type of advice, but for foreign vendors, it's a 1042S form as opposed to a 1099 miscellaneous.
Okay, and thanks for that too. We have another question about credit card payments. What does that look like as far as 1099 e-filing?
So you don't file a miscellaneous form for any credit card payment. The credit card payments go through what's called a 1099K form, and that's done by the card provider or the third-party settlement entity. Somebody you might be thinking like eBay, someone like that. That's a third-party settlement entity. Those are the kind of people who file a 1099K. So if you're paying someone via credit card, you do not have a 1099 miscellaneous obligation for the payments via credit card.
Okay, and thanks for that as well. Just a couple more questions before we're gonna pass it over. Um, do you know about Arizona and California filing requirements and where you can keep up with them? And more generally, where can you go to find information about state filing?
Yeah, we have a page on Tax 1099 that covers what the state requirements are. But California, off the top of my head, California is a combined federal state filing program participant. Arizona, I believe, is as well. So in those situations, if you're using Tax 1099, the state will automatically get the e-file as well.
Okay, thanks for that information. We are going to go ahead and dive into a little bit of the demo now and show you how this sync works, show you inside of Tax 1099. And we're actually going to have Ed start sharing his screen there, and we're going to invite Preeti to do a little bit of a voiceover as we're walking through the bill.com and Tax 1099 sync. So just a moment while that's loading here.
It's coming up. Give me just a minute.
So I see a question in the chat box right now. How do we notify the IRS that our vendors have approved an e-filing of their 1099? And actually, I want to address that. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding. You don't need to have vendor opt-in for e-filing with the IRS, only for e-delivery of the form to the vendor. So you don't need to obtain permission from the vendor to send that through our system or through a third-party e-filer. You can do that, no issue at all. What you need to collect the opt-in for is delivering that by email or, like we mentioned, through the Tax 1099 portal. You'll need to make sure and confirm that with the vendor before doing that.
And just to follow up on that, Geneva, the IRS doesn't want to get a file or anything that says, yes, this one said they would take an electronic delivery, and no, that one said they wouldn't. It's just you maintain those records in case the IRS ever needs to audit that and make sure that that you did have permission for the electronic delivery.
Right, right.
And I'm still getting a connecting message, Geneva, just so you know. So I'm still working on pulling this up. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Let's do a couple more questions then about foreign vendors in the 1042S. Is that only for those who work in the US with a visa? I'm getting a bit of a feedback right now.
Yeah, try that again, Geneva.
Okay, I think that's better now. Someone asked a question about 1042S and how you can file that.
Yeah, so we do offer the 1042S in Tax 1099. So it is available. There's a paper form that you could find, probably not through your local Office Depot or anything like that, but there are paper forms that are available. The 1042S is a bit more of a cumbersome form because of Chapter 3, Chapter 4, FATCA compliance. There's a lot more that goes into the 1042S form than the 1099 miscellaneous form, but we do offer it available as an e-file and can mail those copies out as well.
Okay, great. Yeah. And are you still having a loading screen over there?
I am. I'm going to start it again and see if it works better here. Sorry.
Okay. I think that several questions have come in for bill.com too. I don't know if you'd like to hop in, Preeti, and answer some of those. But I'm just looking through here. Here's a good one about if a vendor is a 501c3 or a 501c6 organization, do they need to receive a 1099? And is there any way of, oh, and I see your screen is up now. So we'll come back to that question actually, because I want to give enough time for Ed to show us around the system here as he's getting that up and running. Thank you
Yeah,
everyone
thanks.
for
And
all
I'm
your
going to go into
questions.
bill.com so I can start from there.
Great, okay.
All right, and I think for Preeti, did you want to talk through this as I'm kind of demonstrating the information?
Yeah, I'd be happy to, but I think someone needs to go on mute, otherwise it's going to slightly echo. So, hello everyone. So while you're seeing the current experience of Bill.com, we're assuming that you've already set up the vendors as a 1099 vendor. Otherwise, you can go under payables, vendors, and make sure that you set them up with the correct flag on as a 1099 vendor. For example, you can choose any one of those vendors, Ed, or even select a new vendor. Yeah, why don't you just select one of those? And if you essentially, oops, right there is a flag that indicates that it's a 1099 vendor. So once you've made sure that the vendor is accurately set up, now if you can cancel out and go under settings to make sure that your chart of accounts is set up right. So if you go under accounting and chart of accounts and pick any vendor or even say new, so you have the option of setting up a chart of account with a particular 1099 category, which then indicates which specific box into which the amounts are going to on the form. So now that you've set up your vendors accurately, as well as set up the chart of accounts, we can start to go into connecting to Tax 1099. So if you go under App Center, we have a bunch of apps, and so by selecting Tax 1099 and going through the setup process, since this was already set up, we can either disconnect or just go and launch on. So yeah, go ahead and select Tax 1099. And so you'd start by first connecting it. So hit connect. And essentially right now you'll have the option of either logging in to a prior account, or you can really sign up and create a brand new account depending on how familiar you are with this process. And the accounts don't have to be the same as what the Bill.com account was. They can be completely separate. So since Ed already has an account created, let's go ahead and log in. And so at this point, you can select the company, which is the Bill.com company, as well as select the tax year for which you wanted to import the 1099 related vendors. And so now you can load data. And so the filter option basically ensures that the chart of accounts is accurately mapped. So essentially processing as it's importing all that good data that Ed had in his account. So that's basically giving you all the details of the specific vendors, the specific amounts of the transaction, and what have you. The green indicator there presents that it's good data, there's really no changes required, and you're set to go. Versus at the payer level, there is a red dot that basically indicates that you have to add some missing or invalid data. So the EIN, because it is encrypted on the Bill.com side, will not be imported over and will have to be provided on the Tax 1099 side. So with that, I think now you have the data rectified, and now it's turned to green, and so you're all set to moving forward with the form generation process. So Ed, do you want to take over and continue on to add additional details from the Tax 1099 side?
Sure, pretty thanks. I will Did you want, so this is the preview of the form. So you can see the steps that we've been going through up here. We kind of get to skip the first two steps because Bill.com provides all of that information. And so you were on the screen before where you could edit information. This screen is just giving you a vision of the form itself. So you can see what each one of those forms would look like for each one of your different vendors. Make sure that they're mapped up correctly based off of your chart of accounts in Bill.com. I'm going to click next, and it's going to finalize those forms, which will bring them in the rest of the way to Tax1099 and actually create the forms for you. And then I will be on the checkout page. We also call this the View, Edit, Submit Forms page. You'll see I got 6 out of 6 records uploaded successfully. And so I can see here that I have several vendors who have been identified as needing a particular state filing. These are in the state of Arkansas, but you might have Pennsylvania, you might have Oregon. Those are direct to state filings. These guys are either in a state that doesn't have a state tax, Texas, Florida, Washington, or doesn't require a separate state filing, California, Maryland, someone who participates in combined federal state filing. You can also do a couple of things here. So you can see I have email selected for all of these vendors. So we can automatically do that. If you don't want to send emails, simply turn that off. And you could send the US Postal Service copies. Or if you choose neither of those options, then you will get a chance later to download a PDF copy and print those and mail them yourself. Something else that is nice to take advantage of here, I'm going to select my, my different forms that I have here, and I'm going to change the vendor schedule date. So notice I've got them all scheduled for January the 15th. We automatically give you 7 days for doing that filing, but you may want to push that out as far as you can. So for my non-Box 7 forms, my deadline is March 31st. It's really April the 1st this year because March 31st, as you can see, is on a Sunday. I'm going to choose April 1st for anything that's not Box 7. And then for my Box 7 forms, January 31st is going to be my deadline date. So I'm going to pick that, and we're going to update those deadline dates for you. We won't send those to the IRS until that date, and you have the opportunity to edit those forms up until the point where those that date comes. So up through March 31st or up through January 30th for the form, I can come in and I can make edits to those forms. You can view them, you can edit them, you can delete them here. All of those things are available to you. And then when you select and go next, then you come to the checkout page, and that's where you pay for us to do the e-file and any of the other options that you may have selected, like state filing or US Postal Service. And then once you've done the forms, I mentioned putting them to PDF, they will go live here under the Manage Forms page. You'll have your federal forms, your state forms. We do reconciliation forms in case you do any sort of payroll type of forms that you need to do. So we can handle all of those different types of forms for you there. But the forms will be here, and they will be under the various tax years that you may have used, Tax 1099. I've got 2018 forms, I've got 2015 forms, so you can have any number of forms out there. And you can see these will be were created, submitted through the system on January 24th. The scheduled date is over here, so they won't process until that date comes to pass. And then I've got a number of options I can do here. I can print new copies, I can mail copies, I can do lots of different things that that I have the ability to do here inside of Tax 1099. And then just the one final thing that I want to show before I go back to Geneva and we answer any questions that are there. We had mentioned the two-way sync, so just real quickly, under my Manage Recipient page, this is where all of my people go once I've imported them from from Bill.com, or once I've created them manually, they'll all be here. But I can go here and I can select all of these. If I want to send W-9s out, I can. If I want to 10 match, I can. But I can also sync them back to Bill.com, and that enables me to push the information back over to Bill.com and even upload the W-9 form if that's something that I want to do. I just need to enter my Bill.com credentials here. This is my Tax 1099 credentials. I just need to enter my Bill.com credentials, and that information will flow back over into Bill.com. So I have the same information here as I do in Bill.com. Geneva, with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm just going to turn it back over to you for any questions that may have come up as I was talking, and as Preeti was talking us through that demo.
Great, yeah. We did have a couple questions, mostly about the EIN sync. So there was a little bit of confusion about what information exactly pulls over when you sync your Bill.com and your Tax 1099. So can you clarify just a little bit what goes on there?
Yeah, so if you're creating a record for a vendor in Tax 1099, you can do as little as the email address and the name. You can collect the rest of that through the W-9. You can also add it manually if you have that information available to you. Then you can sync it over to bill.com, and it will send the tax identification number. It will check the 1099 eligible flag. It will send the name. It will send the address. All the vendor details that you've collected on the W-9 will be sent over to bill.com, including the W-9 form itself. And then on the bill.com side, you can begin paying that vendor because you are secure in the knowledge that you've gotten the W-9 form. Even on Tax 1099, before you do that, you can do the tax identification number matching, where we validate the information through the IRS and make sure that that is correct and accurate information before you sync it over to bill.com. So we're sending the full vendor record from Tax 1099 over to bill.com. Once you're in bill.com, of course, you'll do more things. You'll be able to add that person for electronic payments. You'll be able to do all the scope of services that bill.com offers with that vendor from the starting point of creating it from Tax 1099.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying that. Another question that we're getting several times here is some people looks like they switched to Bill.com in the middle of the year. So they have half of their information not in Bill.com right now. And how would they be able to file for those people that are not in Bill.com?
Yeah, that happens every year, and a lot of people switch to Bill.com in the middle of the year, but maybe they had a different service prior to that. So we do Excel imports as well. You could bring the data in from Bill.com, so you've got all of your information from Bill.com. During the import process there, when I saw the green dots, there's an export capability there. You can export that information and put it into an Excel format. You can add all of the other information from your other service, no matter where that is. They probably have a report that you could pull and put that information into Excel. And so then you could pull it all into one Excel file and use our Excel import as opposed to finishing off through the bill.com import. And that would enable you to combine those records. So you might have paid Joe in both systems. You paid him 600 in one, you paid him 700 in the other. We can combine that into one form for $1,300 total on that form through that Excel import process.
Okay, great, yeah. And on the subject of reports, what kind of things do we have that you can look at as you're filing, after you're filing, just kind of make sure everything's on the right track?
Yeah, there are 3 steps in the process where you can export the information to Excel to validate it back to bill.com. So one is on that screen with the green dots. One is on the checkout screen that I was on where I was selecting U.S. Postal Service mail. And then the other is after you've done the submission, even while the forms are scheduled, you can export the information to Excel from the Manage Forms page. So you can always get that information out to Excel to validate, cross-check, cross-reference, whatever you want to do to make sure that you've got that covered.
Okay, great, yeah. And then here's just a good summary question that we have from Jose. So thanks for asking that, Jose. He says, I have all W-9s for my 1099 eligible vendors. I just need to sync everything to tax1099.com. What do I need to do to be able to e-file to the IRS? And can I enable both paper mailing and emailing to my vendors?
Sure. So that paper, excuse me, that process that Preeti showed you, you start in bill.com, you connect the app, you link it over to Tax 1099, you get the green dots, you push it to the next page, or you select postal service mailing and emailing if you want to. You can select either or both, or neither if you want. And then when you click the next page and check out, your e-file will be scheduled for the date that you determined on the scheduling page. And then we will send out the mail copies and the email copies for you on your behalf. And we will have the IRS notified as soon as that scheduled date comes.
Okay, great. It looks like we're almost out of time here. I just want to thank Bill.com again for joining this webinar with us, for putting this on with us. We're really happy that all of the participants joined us today, and thank you for all your wonderful questions. We will be sure to follow up on all of those. There's several that we didn't get to, but rest assured that we'll be contacting you. And you can also feel free to reach out to us through our support channels, and we will send the recording, we will send the chat questions, we'll send a PDF of the slides as well, so you'll have all that information as a resource for you. We will include pricing in the follow-up email. I see that question being asked in the chat box. So yes, we will send that out. Thank you again, everyone, for joining, and especially to Preeti and Dan, and also Sarah from over at Bill.com. We hope that this was an informative session, and we hope to talk to you again soon. Thank you, and have a good day.